Okay, so let's begin. Joey Shamah founded Elf Cosmetics, which he ended up selling to a private equity firm, which then took the company public. Most recently, he became a partner and CEO in Fit for Life, a fitness and yoga accessory powerhouse whose brands include Gaiam, Champion, and Fila. Joey is very involved with Barkai Yeshiva and is one of the leading members in the community's APAC delegation. So, Joe, I think we met close to 6 years ago. I invited you to join a panel in Baruch College in Dr. Tao's class. You proved to be an incredibly insightful individual back then, someone with tremendous business acumen and a person with a ton of motivation and drive, all from a really young age. So I really, truly value you as a close friend, mentor, and someone who has done so much for our community at large. So really thank you for all your efforts, and we're just extremely excited to have you with us tonight. So before we dive deeply into the conversation, Joe, I think we've been asking all of our panelists, what has your day looked like during the quarantine? Has your schedule or habits really changed much, or have you been sticking to the same thing that you would have been doing pre the quarantine?
So first of all, Ralph, thank you for having me. I think the center, I think it's great that they're doing this. I think it's making the most of quarantine time, and I was honored to be asked by you. Ralph, I feelings mutual. We know each other for about 6 years. You came to me under an SBH type of mentoring program, and I've been following you in your career and everything you do on the nonprofit. So as much as I'm giving this talk, you'll be able to you could probably give this talk now, but I'm sure in a few years it will be reciprocated and you'll be the one giving the talk. So thank you, Ralph.
Thanks,
so
Thank you.
I keep telling all the people I work with that I think quarantine is a lifestyle that I may continue post quarantine life. It's agreeing very well with me, this working at home thing. Over the last few years, we're actually running offices in Colorado, as well as we have some employees in LA. So this Zoom or Blue Jeans, which we've been using for some time, is definitely no stranger to us. I have an office in Colorado, which some of my direct reports are in, and we video conference all the time. Obviously, personally, the earlier days of Corona and COVID were very, very tough for me. Unfortunately, I lost my father-in-law through Corona, one of the first, if not the first in the community, on March 20th. And my family and my wife's family was obviously dealing with that. And then my father fell ill to Corona. Thank God he's doing much better. He's fine. But we had a scare there. But post the health concerns and health risks of Corona, the quarantine life is very much agreeing with me. Every morning I get up between 6 and 8. I get up at 6 and I'm just by myself from about 6 to 8. I've started meditating. I'm on day 40 of a daily meditation app, Waking Up app with Sam Harris. I highly recommend it. It's 10 minutes before I pray, and then I pray by myself, obviously. And at 8 o'clock, I start getting the kids up for Zoom. We have breakfast sort of together. And then 9 o'clock, we kind of all go our separate ways until lunchtime, where we all have lunch from 12 to 1. It's a set time. I think the schools did a great job coordinating and having everything together. And then, we sometimes have a family workout late in the day, or we really enjoy, or at least I'm enjoying all this quality time with the kids. And we have dinner together. And then somehow or another, every time you turn around, it's Friday again. So really the weeks are literally flying by. I know March was difficult for everyone. It felt like forever. But since then, really starting April, and as we are on the cusp of June, it's like all of a sudden the weeks are really flying by. So that's my my daily schedule. I am wearing pants now. I know that was definitely a topic of question. A lot of people do this without, but I am wearing pants.
Seems like you're making the most of it, and it comes as no surprise knowing you. So, okay, Joe, but this is a Center Young Adult event. We are joined by a large number of young adults on the session. You founded ELF with your dad when you were about 22, 23 years old. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and how you mustered the strength and confidence to start a company at such a young age?
Yeah, so a few things on that. As I've learned later in my career, it's much easier to buy a business than to start a business. So I think, what I learned really on, first of all, I had the support and financial backing of my father as we went into business together, who had a successful apparel company, which was extremely helpful, or essential, I should say. But I think what I did on an operational level throughout my career is always set goals and really work towards attaining those goals, but knowing fully that you'll never achieve the goal you initially set out for. You have to be adaptive. You have to change directions as things come up. When we first started Elf, we had the idea of bringing 13 different products in 13 different assortment packs, and we thought all the retailers would just take the assortment packs. And then we thought we were going to sell to some of the dollar stores, to Dollar General. Quickly didn't happen, and along the way, it about just go. Ultimately, you're not going to be, things will come up that you have to be able to kind of bob and weave and block and tackle as they do, but you want to keep your goals in mind. It doesn't mean you're sacrificing everything you want, but ultimately, at Elf, when we first started, and probably any of you have heard me speak, has heard this before, as we approached the dollar stores and we approached a lot of the Dollar Generals and Family Dollars of the world, we wanted to sell them Elf, and they were like, "It's cute, but we're not really interested. We're more committed to our quantity over quality," and we were all about quality makeup at an affordable price point. And then that made us pivot. So we pivoted right there. I called up Blue Switch, my friend Richie Shamah, and I was like, "Richie, I had a website. I needed an e-commerce platform." And we spent $5,000. We did an e-commerce platform, a very, very simple, and probably something that would not fly today. But in 2004, it was what it was. It was definitely a step. E-commerce was novel at the time, and we launched the website, and we also hired a PR firm. And we said, if the retailers aren't going to want it, we're going to create a demand, and obviously, 2004 is not 2020. A lot of things have changed, but the concept stays the same. So we created demand through the magazines and through the PR. So when Glamour magazine called us up and they said, "Oh, we want to feature your concealer in our May issue," we said, "Great." But they said, "Are you in Walgreens?" We're like, "No." "Are you in Target?" We're like, "No." They're like, "Well, how am I going to show my readers a product that they can't get?" So we ultimately, we had the website in the works. We launched the website on June 16th, 2004. And then it took off from there. We were featured in Glamour and in Good Housekeeping and a lot of different publications, as well as email. And then we started to have a business. And we continued to ride that wave until the retailers finally came on board. And in 2008, Target came on board, and then Walmart came on board, and then the rest is kind of history.
If there's something you could tell your younger self about that experience, what would it be, and what lesson could you share with all the young adults tuning in now?
I think that you got to be ready. I think life, Corona is a perfect example of this. Life is a game of whack-a-mole. You don't know what's going to come up, and you just have to be ready. And you don't want to, a lot of people are so stuck in the details, and they're stuck in what they want, and they're stuck in making things perfect. I've worked now with a few different people as we've bought businesses and changed specifically e-commerce sites. And people are like, "Well, I have to do this slowly and this slowly and this," and like they're trying to walk the tightrope line of perfection across the board. And no one realizes what happens along the way. They realize at the end and the destination. So as you walk that tightrope, you will break things. Things won't work. You'll have rough days. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm a fast mover. I like to move fast. So I'm like a bulldozer. It doesn't make it easy for the people that work with me, but I have the goal in mind, and I don't see what gets there. So as you go through the process, don't focus on the process and the perfection along the way. I would just focus on the end and getting there, and always knowing that the end that you initially set out for doesn't necessarily be the end that it will be. And you kind of got to roll with the punches.
Absolutely. So you kind of answered my second question already, but I'm going to go for it anyways, and we'll try to pivot away from it. But so you mentioned Elf is probably one of the first companies in our community for sure, but one of the first in general in that industry that focused on the idea of fast fashion. So constantly innovating and introducing new products, right? Similar to the Zara clothing model. And you were also one of the first companies, which seems like almost by force and by product of the circumstances that you're in, that turned to the direct and consumer model. So as a 22, 23-year-old kid in 2004, coming off of the .com bubble, how'd you have the foresight and the vision to say, okay, direct to consumer is going to be the model going forward and building a brand that way, which was completely unorthodox for the business world at the time?
So I think those are two separate questions, right? So I think one is the fast fashion question, and one is the D2C, the direct to consumer question. So I'll answer them a little bit differently. So the whole concept of fast fashion, it didn't dawn on me that we were a fast fashion company until we were in a meeting with one of our private equity firms. We were actually in Scottsdale, Arizona at a retreat, and one of the partners turns to me and he goes, "You did this fast fashion thing, taking your apparel mentality into cosmetics, and now you're doing it and you're revolutionizing the cosmetic world." And I was like, I never thought of it like that, because I think as we're going through the motions, we were just leaner, quicker, leaner and quicker than, who's become now our competitors. If you look at Revlon, or you sit in a new product development meeting at Maybelline, they're talking about 2024. I think what we were doing is we were just nimble enough, and we didn't have red tape, and we didn't have to really go through a lot of the product innovation and the layers and everything. So in 2008 or 9, there was this Bare Essentials. Bare Essentials was huge. They were everywhere. It was on QVC. It was in Sephora. It was on it was direct to consumer, direct infomercial, and everyone was following this natural makeup. And they were launching it in 18 months, and we launched it in like 60 days. Not because we're smarter, not because we're better, but just because we're running it an efficient operation. So I didn't have to go to the product developer and the marketer and do market research and I just took some samples. We went to China and we kind of got it done. So and then I think that's where the D2C piece, which was more the marketing engine, we were creating a name. And we were creating a name again. We didn't set out to do it this way, but it was a matter of necessity. It's about being able to scrounge and put things together. But we hired a PR firm. We had a great story. And as my first publicist said, it's like, we just got to light this wildfire. So we were giving the editors, and not to sound cocky, but we were giving them things to write about. So if our lip gloss, it still is lip gloss, was $1 or $24, that's something Good Housekeeping wants to show. Or if we were coming out with, or Lucky Magazine, which used to be around, we did a whole story on us because of what we were offering. And we didn't fully get it until it evolved. And then the D2C piece was, again, out of necessity. We didn't have national distribution. If you told me in 2003 you could have a successful D2C website, or you could sell all Walgreens, I would have said, let me sell Walgreens. It's a hell of a lot easier. But little did I know that it was that direct to consumer that really gave us our edge. It gave us our edge for a lot of reasons. And I think, again, being nimble and learning and learning along the way is the key thing that I've always learned throughout my career, because we had this .com engine, and outside of being a good margin, we did good margin on the site. A lot of traffic was coming organically, because we weren't, it was coming through the magazines and through that. And we were able to leverage we were doing full margin revenue. So we weren't waiting 30, 60, 90, if ever, for our products, for our dollars back from retailers. We're getting it the next day. And we were working on high margins. So it was when this virality started to wear off of Elf is when it got a little more challenging. And that's when we started to grow. But I remember, and we were lucky enough to layer on a lot of some retailers. But I remember when our first few years, struggling, how are we going to do $100,000 a month? I mean, Elf launched its quarterly year-ending earnings call today, and they did $282 million last year. So, I mean, the company come a long way, but it's not by just sticking on our laurels and thinking of knowing what we need to do. We kind of evolved along the way.
It's incredible to hear the inside story. So thanks for sharing. So I mentioned Baruch College a little earlier when we first met. That panel was before the sale of Elf Cosmetics. It was actually, I think it was in the midst of when there were a bunch of rumors of takeovers and potential acquisitions from major companies that you were sharing with us. So first of all, could you share what that experience was like and how it propelled Elf to the next level? And secondly, could you share with us some of the lessons you learned in building a sellable business, or was that not the intention and it just kind of fell into your lap?
So I'll be very frank. My intention from day one was always to make money, right? So I don't have a passion for cosmetics. I don't have a passion for fitness products. I enjoy fitness a little bit more than cosmetics, but we'll leave it at that. Um, but I think, but the one thing I didn't want to do is, there's a lot of talk today when you're building businesses about successful businesses and successful platforms. And I can only relate to the successful business piece, because a lot of people are building successful platforms, and a successful platform doesn't necessarily have a profitable outcome. And people sink a lot of money in, and they wait and they wait and they wait, and Uber and Airbnb will work and WeWork won't. And there's a lot of things like that that are in the market. We've always built our business, my father and I, on a profitability level. Even from a .com standpoint, you could invest in acquisition, or which can pay off through a lifetime value of a customer, or you could invest in acquisition and pay off on a first order, an opening order. And we've always been, for the former, not the latter, because we like to run successful businesses. So was selling the business in the cards from day one? No, not necessarily. Was it off the table? No, not either. It wasn't either. But I think in terms of, so a little more history, in 2010, we took our first private equity investment, and that was a minority investment from a company called TSG Consumer Partners. And they invested at a great company and a great brand at the right time. And we were new to this, and we didn't know how big it was going to get. I think when we met, and what you referenced is L'Oreal had actually reached out to us in 2000, a year later, about 11 months later, and they wanted to buy Elf for about significantly more than TSG invested in. And we were going through the throes of that. And then at the last minute, one Friday afternoon, I got a call that they're going to pull out. And it was a shock. And they couldn't get comfortable with some of our sourcing from China and whatever. And then fast forward another 14 months, TPG came in. So I'm not exactly sure when exactly it was, but there's been a lot of validating things along the career, the early years of Elf, that we had, interest from private equity. And the cosmetic space is no stranger to M&A and private equity investment. I mean, you have a remotely successful cosmetic or personal care, skincare company, and you have bankers and private equity, courting you very quickly. But I think as we continue, but I think they also saw something that maybe my father and I didn't, in how successful this would be and then this could be over time. But in 2014, when we did sell a majority stake throughout to TPG Growth, that was when we kind of took a back seat, and an operating partners came in along with the private equity money, and we really spent the better part of 2 years working with a transition team and learning a lot. And I don't want to get too ahead on that, because we can talk about it a little later. But it was I think there's so much to offer by learning from best practices that other people do. As an entrepreneur, like every type of company, depending on its stakeholders, whether you're a public company, a private company, a small company, a company with partners, like all the stakeholders have different goals. And I think we've learned over the years so much from them on how to run a business and how not to run a business if you're a different type of stakeholder. And I think, it's been it was a very interesting process. Did I answer your question, or I think there was one more piece? Do you want to go back to that?
Your call, but whatever you want.
No, I think
I'm gonna, yeah,
unless there's a
we'll
follow
go
up.
with that. I'm gonna ask you a follow-up question on that. So you mentioned you got your first investment from a PE firm in 2010, another one in 2014. It seems like from what you're telling us that you ran Elf in a very tight-knit family-owned business, and suddenly you have these private equity, more finance-driven, professional corporate guys, trying to influence the company and getting involved. So how difficult was that transition from running this nimble operation to dealing with guys that had more of a corporate executive background?
So two things. The first is, as you're going through a process, for any of you who are considering it or have the opportunity to down the road, I would say never focus on there is a finish line at the end of that process, positive or negative, and there will be a day after that process. So don't just think about the end of it, but think post end of it. And we were very fortunate to when we sold the minority, really nothing changed. We had partners, we had a board meeting every quarter, but other than that, it was my show, our show. We had it was whatever we wanted went. And we had issues, and they had expectations, and bankers. I always say every banker should be an operator. So if any bankers are on listening, I apologize, but it's not as simple to run a business as it is to increase a number on a spreadsheet. So just because Walmart has 4,000 doors, you can't just add a zero next to 400 and be in 4,000 doors, although you could do that in a financial model. So that's kind of it's like, well, just sell someone else. It doesn't work like that. Obviously it's challenging, but and I would say in a situation where you're growing, everyone's your friend. So, and there's no issues. So when we invested with TPG and we grow the business 3x in 3 years or 2 years, there was no rocky waters. They were just patting us on the back, and they were very happy. But as you bring in, the private equity is the money behind it. But when you bring in an operating team who bring in operators and do things differently than you, a lot of people have it's my baby syndrome. I never had my baby syndrome. I built the company, and I was happy to see it thrive, and I was happy to make money along the way. But it's hard to see your SG&A, your sales and general expenses go up 3-4x before the sales do, and investing in infrastructure and things like that. But at the same time, as you're a shareholder alongside with the shareholders, you have to take it in stride. As an entrepreneur, I applied a lot of the things that I learned through them to my business, what to do and what not to do. So things like, I don't know, looking at SKU rationalization as you look at a portfolio across the business, or you look at an S&O supply and production process, how you implement that, like all those. There's a lot of goodness that veterans of Clorox, Procter & Gamble, L'Oreal all bring to you, but they're also not worried about the bottom line. So if it costs me $500,000 to move goods across the country, I don't care. But if it's my pocket, I do. So there's a lot of stuff that you learn going through the process, and you take what you take and you don't what you don't.
Absolutely. Well said. Okay, so we mentioned a bit earlier, mentioned it a couple of times, that after the sale of Elf, you took a few years off, just trying to explore what's next, and then you ended up partnering up on the acquisition of Fit for Life. So what principles and insights have you taken with you from Elf, from past successes and failures, and built into this new company and into the team as you move forward?
So I think so it wasn't a few years off. I took 6 months off, and I was going to kill myself, because when you go from having something to, I remember a few days where I just sat home and binge watched House of Cards. Not a lifestyle for me. Although quarantine is a little like that, but it's much different. What I learned, first of all, I think when we looked at Fit for Life, and we looked at, we bought the operating company of Gaia Americas, which was a fairly large fitness company. We saw a lot of things that we clearly understood. Now, I didn't know what a yoga mat, the thickness of a yoga mat, and I didn't know what the spectrum and the yoga mats, but I knew how to buy from China. I knew how to warehouse. I knew what EDI was. I knew how to sell Target. I knew how to sell Kohl's. I knew how to sell Amazon. Like, we knew a lot of the pieces, and yes, the elements, what was inside the box, were different. A lot of the business elements were the same. So I think, we took a lot of just general operating procedure, whether you're buying a shirt, a lipstick, or a yoga mat, or whatever. We took a lot of those principles. And then we valued tribal knowledge. So I don't need to be the smartest person in the room on every front. I need to respect what people know, and being able to, be confident in my decision, not necessarily always right, but be confident in my decision based on what the players around the table are telling me. So as we met with the people in the company, we valued very much their supply chain knowledge. We valued very much their product knowledge. We valued very much their sales knowledge. And we didn't rush to make any decisions. We digested it. We understood where they're coming from, what worked, what has worked, what doesn't work. And we learned, there was different. So I'll give you an example. One thing we preserved we preserved the big nuggets. So the Target business, the Amazon business, the Kohl's business, we preserved. We understood it. There was another element to the business called Spry, which was the fitness business called Spry Commercial, which we didn't value so much, and it was selling a little mom and pop gyms. They weren't really repeat customers, and it was a very wide catalog. It was maybe 3,000 different SKUs, and we made the decision to chop the SKUs and rationalize, and it was just the right business decision. So we learned a lot of SKU rationalization and things like that through some of the private equity, and we really applied that to the business. We've reskinned that business, that it's a very successful part of our business now. It looks a lot different than it did almost 4 years ago when we took it over, but that's that's how we applied different concepts, or that's how we manage through an acquisition. So I think you need to find something that is within your wheelhouse that you understand, and I think you need to have trust in the people that have more knowledge than you. You're not always you don't know everything, or I don't know everything, and I think you can be successful at integrating what you knew and what you do based on your stakeholders as you enter into a new venture.
And I can imagine it's keeping you really busy during the quarantine as more and more people work out from home.
That is true.
Okay, so going more big picture now, what do you think the future of business looks like post-COVID-19, given the world will be reeling from this for quite a while, it seems like? And what could each of us be doing now to take advantage of the opportunities that lie ahead?
Well, I definitely don't know all the answers to those questions, because if I did, I'd be fairly more successful than I am right now. Sorry, 1 second. Did I lose you?
No, you're good.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's a reality that remote working, whether it be working at home or whether it be managing offices out of state and things like that, is much more of a reality. I do think people still feel that in-person meetings are a lot more efficient. I think we don't know what retail is going to look like. I think there's a big question. I mean, I think we've seen the successes of the retailers that have opened from a market share and a growth standpoint. And I think we've obviously seen a lot of retailers that are waiting to come open. But I think there's the mall mentality and all that is a big question mark, and we don't know where and how that's going to change. I think, me specifically in the gym business, you mentioned earlier at-home fitness. I used to go to the gym every morning at 6:40. We would be in the gym by 7:30 in the morning, and I don't see that entering into my routine for the near future. I think people are going to continue working out at home. I think their fitness. I think some people. I think there are a lot of elements of quarantine that were extremely liberating. Obviously, the health concerns and what led us here was very unsettling. But I think the lifestyle that it's afforded many of us, whether it be more family time, whether it be at-home workouts, whether it be less commuting time, whether it be environmental alleviation of, just general smog and things like that. I think there's a lot of things that came out of this quarantine that we don't know how society, and I think, shopping.com, the Instacart craze, Amazon, I mean, all that. Retail was already a little shaky. I think this may have nudged it a lot more. And I think people are going to think twice if they're going to order Instacart or go to the supermarket or things like that. I think it's just going to significantly impact a lot of ways we operate on a day-to-day.
So not to ask you your best kept secret, but are there any areas or industries in specific that you're looking at to make a potential investment in, or your next move?
So I'm a very opportunistic investor or operator. I mean, as I look, I think I'm more of a hard goods guy for the sake that hard goods are more replenishable and it's less seasonal, things like that. I haven't seen anything yet. I think there will. I don't know. I'm definitely looking at things, and if anyone out there has any opportunities, I'm happy to hear about them. But I don't know. I don't know specifically where the next one will take me. I didn't think I'd be back in beauty, and I am back in beauty. I partnered up with my father and Victor and Ralph Azrak on the Laura Geller and Julep brands, and I didn't think I would be back in beauty that quickly, and it was just based on opportunity. So I think it depends on what comes our way.
Thanks. So before we turn to the crowd for some questions, we are here with the center, an organization that's so integral to our community, among many others that you're involved with as well. Over the past several weeks, I think we could all agree that we've seen our community step up in ways that we couldn't have imagined in terms of the charity we've given and just being there for people in general. So could you tell us a little bit about the importance of giving back in your life, especially during these times, and how it has helped shape you into the individual you've become?
Sure. So I've always been fortunate enough to work with a lot of great organizations. You mentioned Barkai and APAC, and I worked with the SCA for a while as well. And I think I think there's two. I've really learned over the last few years that there's really three ways of giving in in the capacity that the community needs. I think on the organizational side, there are two. There's the lay leadership, and then there's the financial philanthropic dollars that are needed. And then the third is personal. And I think I want to focus for 1 minute on the personal side. And I think what makes this community and the center so integral is our ability to get involved in organizations like SBH and Hatzalah and things like that on a volunteer and a dollar level as well. But I also think there's so many, everyone in this community have expertise in something. And, I have a good friend who sells life insurance who I unfortunately had to deal with a life insurance claim over the last few months. And it's just a rocky territory going through something you've never gone through and things you don't know. But he was able, because of his expertise, he was able to hold my hand, walk me, my mother-in-law through it, and he was able to help us figure it out. And we were able to sleep at night better, quicker, easier. And I think everyone in this community has something. So that they're an expert in and that can help others. And I think bringing us together, like we do in shuls and we do in schools and we do through our neighbors and the center, just being connected to one another and knowing where to turn in the time of need for anything, whether it be financial advice, whether it be personal advice. I think it's huge. So I think that's where the center and others are very, very integral. Over my career, my non-for-profit, I've played a lot of different roles, and it's challenging. I would say it's more challenging to work for nonprofits and volunteer for nonprofits than it is to run businesses, because often there's a lot of stakeholders, there's a lot of opinions, and ultimately you're not doing it for yourself. So you can argue that some things you do things in business, they're definitely selfish and they're definitely for your personal gain. But when you're helping at a school or trying to educate people on APAC, the importance of Israel advocacy, or working with the SCA to create unity across member organizations, I think it's very challenging, because it's not your way or the highway. It's what's best for the organization, and you have to understand, and you have to put yourself in the shoes of all the people that are part of the organization, from the donor base to the employees to the constituents everything. So it's really challenging, but at the same time, I think it's equally rewarding. I think when I walk into a Barkai, or I go to a Sephardic APAC event, or I see the success the SCA is having with a lot of their event, including their event in about an hour at 8 o'clock for Yom Yerushalayim. It's great to see that. I think that begets the personal part, and it creates more of a community atmosphere. So I think it's great to be successful. I wish it for everybody, but it's also great to give back, and it's great to be part of something that gets bigger than you, and you're able to make your community and your society a better place.
Are there any efforts or projects that you're working on in particular right now?
Right now, not really. I mean, I've shifted some. I'm working on some personal things, like just one-on-one stuff. I've also, been fortunate to increase my the philanthropic dollars across some meaningful organizations to us. But right now, I've taken a step back and I'm focusing on building my businesses.
Noted. Thanks. Okay, so thank you, Joe. Incredibly insightful as always. So we're going to open up the floor for some questions. If anyone has a question, you could put it in the chat. I have one already from Jeffrey Sit, Joe. So Jeff wants to know, while growing and adding staff, how did you trust your staff to make decisions, or were you a micromanager? And if you trusted your team, did you take a eyes-on, hands-off approach? Basically, what the question is, what's your management style?
So my management style, and this is something again that I learned from working with private equity, was I'm not a micromanager. You may have gotten that from some of my answers earlier, but I'm clearly, I trust good people, and luckily I've had very good people that worked with me throughout my career. I've also built and prided myself on building very lean organizations. So across my career, I've never had an organization that had more than 100 people in them. The way I build my organizations now is different than I did earlier. Right now, I build an executive team which direct report to me, or we collectively, and then each function kind of manages their own function. So you have ops, finance, sale, like all the different functions, product, and I let them kind of lead. I like to make people make their own decisions, although I hope they agree with me more than they do. But I think I pride myself in not micromanaging, because, as I said before, it's not about perfection along the way. It's about getting where you want to. So and being successful. So I think very much. I think micromanaging. You only have so many hours in a day, and I think micromanaging takes your eye off the ball too much. And you need to let people make their own mistakes, and you don't know everything, or I don't know everything, so you don't necessarily know. Everyone has their own perspective, and I think it's helpful to let it blossom.
Yeah, I think that's something you've echoed multiple times throughout our conversation. Okay, so we have a question from Al Gindi. He wants to know, it's probably one of the most difficult things a CEO or any company has to do is hiring great staff. So Al wants to know, what do you look for in good candidates?
So I'll tell you what I don't look for. I don't think I've ever gone down a resume and looked at where you've gone to school, or what you've majored in, or what you're proficient in, or what languages you speak. I mean, I think we look for, a lot of times, I look for, obviously, people who have been in similar roles that I can relate to, for the needs that we're looking at. I think we look for, a lot of it comes from word of mouth. So if you're coming from a good spot, then I think I'm much more prone to kind of move towards you and give you a shot. I'm also interviewing is like my least favorite thing to do, because I feel like it's all fake. So I'm more apt to hire someone and then understand quickly and make a decision on them, rather than, again, it's not about perfection in the beginning. It's about trust. It's about getting there and then understanding if it's the right fit. So maybe to a fault, we could, we give a chance to somebody and we see if they fit. And if you quickly know they're a round peg in a square hole, you kind of move on. But I don't think you can quickly or accurately judge someone in a 30 or 45-minute interview. And I'm not one of those people who are giving like behavioral science interviews, like how many quarters can you fit in a phone booth type of thing. Like, it's like none of that stuff doesn't really interest me.
Definitely. Okay, so we have a question from Norman S's. I think it's something that, is being discussed a lot in the corporate world. We're seeing that, Amazon may pick up JCPenney's assets, and just a lot of companies in the community talking about consolidation, and just scooping up smaller companies. So I know we already asked you about any areas that you're looking to invest in, but Norman's question is, are you looking at any companies, smaller companies that may be struggling that you might scoop up just to add to your existing business base?
Definitely. We are definitely looking at something that great, and we've looked at a few. Is we are very efficient operators, and we again, as I said, we run lean teams. So being able to find, I missed the first half of your question. I think it cut out a little bit, but being able to find things that are complementary to what we do, across fitness or beauty, is something that we're very interested in tacking on to our portfolio, because we have the back end support. We know how to sell. We know we have a like to operate efficiently, and where I think the more scale we can have, the more efficient we'll be. So very much so.
Definitely. Okay, so going back to Elf for a second, Renee Braha wants to know how you came up with the concept.
So again, the concept we came up with and the concept that we executed on were completely different. So the concept we came up with was if you shopped in the value stores, you had a lot of people offering makeup with no brand benefit or no aspirational value. What we wanted to do was bring more makeup inspired by higher end brands into the value channel, call it the super value channel, the Dollar Generals and the Family Dollars. That didn't happen, and I don't want to go over it again, but we were able to kind of pivot it. So it's changed from, again, I didn't have the secret sauce. We did identify a white space. It wasn't the white space that ended up happening, but we were able to make a successful company.
Was there something about cosmetics specifically that drew you to the industry? I mean, you mentioned that your dad had an apparel company, so, you know, you could have probably very easily went into apparel, but, you know, obviously you chose to go into a category that probably no Syrians were in at the time.
I mean, it was, it's a longer story than this talk allows, but I think we
I'll save it
can,
for offline.
you know, it was something that, yeah, we pursued it, and you know, again, we kind of got to a good spot.
Okay. So we have Sabrina Mala wants to know, what skills would you suggest that some young adults work on now during the quarantine that will make them more valuable assets once we're out of it?
I don't know specifically during the quarantine, but I think from a skill set, I think it's don't sweat the small stuff. Like, it's hard when you're in it in a day to day, and you want, you know, I see a lot of people try to cradle the
Joe, we lost you.
it's not gonna happen. I think you need to be active, but I think you need to have the flexibility to know that you don't know the landscape and you don't know what's going to come along the way, but you kind of just, if you're not looking at the minutia of it and you're looking at the big picture, you're going to trust your people better to make the right decisions. You're not going to agree with their decisions all the time. And as being, you know, being on the other side of that, being the one who's making the decisions and not the boss, but the guy who's reporting to, you have to be okay to fail. Like, no one bats 1,000 and no one gets 100 on every, or most people don't get 100 on every test. Like, you're going to get things wrong. And I think that's okay. That's what makes you stronger along the way.
Definitely. Okay, so Joe, this next question is very technical. So you could opt to tell me that you want to take it offline and I can make the introduction. But Al Gindi again asked, did you have the right legal / financial advice as you were structuring your PE deals? Any mistakes structuring those deals you wish you could have told yourself 6 or 10 years ago?
I mean, I kind of spoke about it. First of all, I think having a good lawyer, not like lawyers, a good lawyer, yes, but I think that's a very subjective term. I think you need to have a lawyer that you feel comfortable with and that you have a mutual respect for, and we luckily have that, and I'm happy to share if anyone needs some legal advice. But I think there's 2 elements to the deal. There's the deal, and then there's the post-life of the deal. And I think depending on the deal you're making, you know, if you're selling all your company, then yeah, just focus on selling, you know, getting the best deal you can right now, and who cares? But if you're getting into a situation where you're going to continue to run it or continue to be involved or be a shareholder, I've learned that there's always another bite of that apple, like they like to say. So you want to make sure that you're protected from, again, if you're a lot of different colors on different type of deals, but if it's a minority deal where you're operating and you're the operating partner and you want to make sure you get compensated in the future for the success you may have. If it's a majority deal, if you're keeping equity and you know, you want to make sure they're doing the right thing for the company so that your equity alongside them is worth more and more over time, and you want them to succeed. So I'm happy to speak to Al at a later point or offline, but I think you definitely, going through the process now 3 or 4 times on both sides, I clearly understand that you don't need to just focus on getting the deal done, but you need to focus on what happens after the deal is done and how you move forward.
Okay. Okay, so last question, just before we close it out. I know you're a big reader, so any good book recommendations?
So I'm not a huge reader, but I've started. I've started taking a liking to these biographies of these modern day giants. So most recently, it's not a new book, but I read Steve Jobs' biography, and now I'm reading the Amazon Everything Store. And I think, and next up is Sam Walton's book. But I think in reading about the really the Midas touches of today, whether it be Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos or Sam Walton or these guys, you see that they all came from humble beginning, or most of them came from humble beginnings, and you see their path along the way. And it's really remarkable to see, also, you learn from them again. They're outside of being, obviously crazy successful billionaires in their own right, but they're fallible. They had mistakes. They've learned along the way. Jeff Bezos bought a ton of companies which you'd never ever heard of, spending hundreds, if not hundreds of millions of billions of dollars. And it's just interesting to see how these stores that have, or these shopping platforms or brands that have come part of our vernacular are, have grown up over the last 50 or 20 years. So I find it very interesting. And I also like to see what books they recommend to be my next book to read.
Got it. Cool. Okay. So, Joe, before I thank you and we close it out, just some public service announcements. So, as Joey mentioned earlier, the SCA and the center are partnering up on a Yom Yerushalayim event tonight at 8 o'clock on scatorah.org. The center also this week is hosting Centered, which is a programs focusing on mind, body, and soul that you could find on scclive.org. And lastly, we have two very exciting Stoop Talk episodes next week. Tuesday night, we're going to be hosting Charlie Harari at 6:15. And Wednesday night, we will be hosting Lori, Cass, and Jules on Instagram Live at 9 o'clock. But you could go to the center's Instagram or website for more information on both. So with that, Joe, I just want to say thank you. You're an incredible individual, someone who's achieved so much at such a young age. And, you have so much tremendous amount of foresight and wisdom. And on behalf of everyone here, I just wanted to say thank you and look forward to hearing everything you build in the future. So thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you, the center, and Ralph. I look forward to me interviewing you in the next coming years.
Definitely. Thanks, Joe.
All right, guys.
Speak to you soon. Take care. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you. That was great.